This is All India Radio. In the weekly program Current Affairs, now we bring you a special program on Mission Life, India's Affirmative Climate Action Plan.
Launched by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2022, Mission Life aims to integrate an environment-friendly living, highlighting the need for mission lifestyle for environment, PM Modi said.
ये एक शब्द है लाइफ, LIFE, यानी लाइफस्टाइल फॉर एनवायरमेंट। आज जरूरत है कि हम सभी लोग एक साथ आकर कलेक्टिव पार्टिसिपेशन के साथ लाइफस्टाइल फॉर एनवायरमेंट यानी लाइफ को एक अभियान की तरह आगे बढ़ाएं। ये एनवायरमेंटल कॉन्शियस लाइफस्टाइल का एक मास मूवमेंट बन सकता है। आज आवश्यकता है माइंडलेस और डिस्ट्रक्टिव कंजम्पशन के बजाय माइंडफुल और डेलिबरेट यूटिलाइजेशन की। ये मूवमेंट एक साथ मिलकर ऐसे लक्ष्य तय कर सकता है जो डाइवर्स एरिया जैसे फिशिंग, एग्रीकल्चर, वेलनेस, डाइटरी चॉइसेस, हाउसिंग, पैकेजिंग, हॉस्पिटैलिटी, टूरिज्म, क्लोथिंग, फैशन, वाटर मैनेजमेंट और एनर्जी जैसे अनेक सेक्टर्स में एक क्रांतिकारी बदलाव ला सकता है।
In the ongoing first Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group meeting under the G20 presidency in India and Bangalore from February 9 to February 11th, the Lifestyle for Environment initiative aims to encourage the adoption of sustainable lifestyles in India and internationally to tackle the challenges of environmental degradation and climate change. Mission Lifestyle for Environment focuses on a three-pronged strategy at demand, supply and policy levels for changing a collective approach towards sustainability. First is by nudging individuals to practice simple yet effective environment-friendly actions in their daily lives. Second is by enabling industries and markets to respond swiftly to the changing demand-supply. The third is to influence government and industrial policy to support both sustainable consumption and production policy. Mission Life has been India's signature initiative at the United Nations and other international platforms for showcasing climate action and early achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, including the coveted COP27 in November last year. During India's presidency of the G20, sustaining and promoting life is among the key focus areas for deliberations. India takes over the presidency of the G20 at a time when governments across the world are striving to build back better after the pandemic. It also coincides with the G20 Troika, comprising three developing and emerging nations, Indonesia, India and Brazil. The Troika, operating together in various groups of the G20, can voice the opinion of the developing world. With this, a G20 presidency aims at being inclusive and action-oriented. It also gives India a unique opportunity to influence the debate and discussion on economic and development policies of about two-thirds of the world population, which contributes to 85% of the global gross domestic production. The G20, along with its finance and Sherpa tracks, has 9 engagement groups comprising non-government participants that provide input to G20 leaders to recalibrate the policy-making process. These engagement groups have widened the scope of collaboration between the G20 nations, including stakeholders from civil society, trade unions, businesses and startups, think tanks, urban development, youth, science and parliaments. It is through these engagement groups that India can share its development model with the G20 nations. Since time immemorial, Indian culture is focused on the aspect of social well-being. A rich cultural heritage not only promotes personal enlightenment, but also the well-being of society too. Taking the legacy of a rich cultural heritage, India's civil society organizations can share the wisdom and operational models which were built in pursuit of meeting the basic needs of its citizens with the G20 CSOs and policymakers. In the ongoing Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group meeting, Union Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs and Petroleum and Natural Gas, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, through a video message, welcomed delegates from G20 countries, guest countries, international organizations, and other esteemed dignitaries to the first meeting of the Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group under India's G20 presidency at Bangalore. Addressing the first Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group meeting, Union Minister Puri said that the consequences of degrading biodiversity and the environment are leading to increasing costs and complexity in all aspects of life. Tackling the interrelated matters of climate change and biodiversity loss demands a concerted and calibrated global effort. This will require committed and far-sighted leadership by the G20 nations, which collectively account for 85% of the world's GDP, 75% of the global trade and two-thirds of the global population. The Global South in particular looks up to the G20 dialogue and desires an urgent consensus that prevents both a climate crisis and a debt crisis for developing nations. Union Minister Puri said,
India is uniquely positioned to champion the aspirations of the Global South. In the last 8 years, the Modi government has taken many transformative steps in advocating climate justice. Prime Minister Modi's bold announcement of the Panchamrit Action Plan at the COP26 in Glasgow envisages India becoming a net zero emissions country by 2070. This is one of the shortest time spans proposed between peak emissions and net zero status by a developing country. India is demonstrating that economy and ecology are not at odds with each other, but in fact are fundamentally intertwined. This year's working group provides an opportunity for G20 nations to conceptualize and adopt a concrete roadmap based on the recommendations at COP27 and Sharm el-Sheikh and the Biodiversity Conference held in Montreal this year.
This year's working group provides an opportunity for G20 nations to conceptualize and adopt a concrete roadmap based on the recommendations of COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh and the Biodiversity Conference. The working group will enable a shift in mindset from ownership to stewardship of natural resources. Affirming the significance of adopting a sustainable lifestyle, Shri Puri said that it is encouraging to note that the 3 identified priority areas to be discussed in this working group are aligned with Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi's lifestyle for environment mission, which emphasizes mindful and deliberate utilization instead of mindless and destructive consumption to protect and preserve the environment. The first Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group meeting under G20 Presidency of India in Bangalore from February 9 to February 11th. The meeting agenda is to adopt an integrated, comprehensive and consensus-driven approach to tackling the challenges of climate change. Several delegates from the G20 countries along with representatives of international organizations participated in the meeting. India is also focusing on Mission Lifestyle for Environment in this working group meeting. To know in detail how the Mission Lifestyle for the Environment will align with the working group meeting, listen to the exclusive bite of Namita Prasad and Nilesh Kumar Shah, Joint Secretary, Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change to AR correspondent Lalima Anija Dang.
We've always believed in Sarva Sukhina Bhavantu, which means let everybody be happy, all living beings be happy, not just living beings, but let God's blessing be on not just us, but the earth, the mountains, the rivers, the trees. That's the kind of philosophy we believe in. Well, so the concept of life got launched by the Honorable Prime Minister and Antonio Guterres last year as a global mission. How does ECSWG look to advancing the agenda of life through its activities?
Well, our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, during the launch of Life Mission in October 2022, along with UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, challenged the prevailing notion that climate change is an issue only related to policy to be led by government or international organizations. He said that people are experiencing the effects of climate change in their surroundings, and in the last few decades, unexpected calamities were witnessed. This is making it amply clear that the climate change goes beyond policy making only, and people themselves are finding that they should contribute as an individual, families, and as communities to the environment. India's G20 presidency wants to catalyze this fundamental mindset shift. Mission Life makes the fight against climate change democratic, in which everyone can contribute within their capacity to protect the environment. Mission Life believes that the environment can be protected by making changes in our daily lives. For example, the adoption of LED bulbs in India for reducing electricity bills and protecting the environment. The ECSWG will advance the agenda of life through its priority areas by promoting lifestyle choices and production practices built upon the pillars of resource efficiency and circular economy, aimed at mindful utilization instead of mindless consumption. The working group will also deliberate on the opportunity to collectively define a new paradigm for sustainable and resilient growth based on life's 3 principles of demand, supply and policy.
Namita ma'am, now what will be the primary focus for India in this G20?
India's presidency offers the G20 countries the opportunity to use the life principles to promote lifestyle choices and production practices built upon the pillars of resource efficiency and circular economy, aimed at mindful utilization instead of mindless consumption. Sustainable lifestyles and choices can help restore degraded landscapes, promote the conservation of marine and terrestrial biodiversity, and lower global resource use and GHG emissions. The Life Mission, one of the guiding lights of the Indian presidency. The Life Mission aims to enhance community participation to ensure sustainable consumption and scale up conservation efforts.
Last year, the Union government published a list of 75 lifestyle practices that can be taken up as climate-friendly behavior under the Mission Lifestyle for Environment. 19 actions have been published under the energy-saving agenda, ranging from a preference for CNG and electric vehicles to installing earthen pots for cooling water. For water saving, 15 actions can be taken from an adaptation of cultivation of less water-intensive crops to creating rainwater harvesting infrastructure in homes, schools and offices. For reducing plastic use, 11 actions were highlighted, from using recycled plastic to use of steel lunch boxes, whereas for sustainable food, 7 actions can be taken, from creating a kitchen garden to preferring locally available and seasonal food. Under the waste reduction or the Swachhata actions, healthy lifestyle adaptation and e-waste reaction, respective actions were highlighted, from feeding unused and uncooked vegetables left over to cattle to preferring cloud storage over a pen drive or hard drive. To understand the significance of Mission Lifestyle for Environment and how India is positioned to lead the world to combat climate change, listen to a special discussion with Dr. Shrikant K. Panigrahi, Director General of Indian Institute of Sustainable Development, and environmentalist Mukul Sanwal, which is moderated by journalist Sanjay Jha.
Climate change goes beyond just policy making, and this Mission Life will make the fight against climate change more democratic, in which everyone can contribute, and it will make us all trustees of the environment.
Mr. Sanwal, how do you see this development and this initiative?
I think the initiative is long overdue, because so far we have been looking at climate change, as the Prime Minister said, as a policy issue, as something that the governments and international community will do, or as something that technology will take care of. But then we found that emissions keep increasing. The date when there will be net zero emissions keeps getting postponed, and then they will change on the ground. Now, what the Prime Minister has really said is 5 things. He has picked on the key issue in climate change, that it is caused by anthropogenic emissions. It is the emissions caused by individual human beings. So what he has said is that let us not look at somebody else to take the action. Let us take it as a community or an individual issue. Now, why is this important? Because ultimately, as people shift to urban areas from rural areas, in the West, 80% of the population is living in cities. We are between the 40s and 50s. As people shift to cities, their lifestyle becomes important. Consumption emissions become more important than production emissions. Most of the population living in cities, their needs for electricity, their needs for transportation, and most of all, their need for cement and steel to build the housing and the roads becomes the most important driver for climate change, not just industrialization or manufacturing. If you see the emissions in the West, most emissions come from transport. It is followed by buildings, and it is followed by waste of food in cities. So the lifestyle of the individual becomes very critical. The third thing is that what Prime Minister has picked up is that it is a recurring issue. As more and more people will shift to cities, as wealth increases, their emissions, their consumption will increase. So in future, the trend will be of increasing emissions. You build a factory, the emissions remain steady for that factory. But when you shift to cities and increase in incomes, it keeps increasing. The fourth point the Prime Minister has made is that we should see ourselves as trustee of the environment. It is not that looking at the world in terms of geopolitical groupings or friends and foes. We are looking at people. When you look at people, you look at society, you look at community, you look at individual, you can bring the world together around this theme. Because this theme is not special to India or to any other country. It is universal. And that comes to the last point, that this is part of civilizational value. Throughout civilization, we have reused, recycled, and reduced our emissions. If you look at our history, we conserved water. The entire Bundelkhand, Telangana area, were rainfall deficient. Monsoon was not that important there as in the Indo-Gangetic plain. water conservation was a part of society, was a part of politics, was a part of the temples and the forts. Similarly, forest conservation was taking place. It was not exploitation of forest for local use, which meant regeneration of forest. So in this manner, what the Prime Minister has really said is, let us look at a global problem in a different light, not in terms of a country's interests, but in terms of societal interests, and see if we can bring the world together around this theme. And I think that is the indication that a lot of heads of state of a number of other countries, including the United Nations Secretary General, have appreciated this move. They have already appreciated this move for a global mission. And as time goes by, I think more and more countries in the world and people in societies in the world will see the significance that let us not look for somebody else for the solution. Let us first see what we can do.
Dr. Panigrahi, so yes, we have seen in last 8 years, the Prime Minister Modi has initiated many green initiatives. How this movement will make P3 model more effective, pro-planet people, mission life? So this movement, when it catches, how will it be more effective?
It will be more effective by Jan Andolan, by means of people's participation. That is the key. Unless each of the global citizens are not owning the globe, not owning the planet cannot be rectified. Now the global temperature has increased 1.15 degrees centigrade, much more than an average normal human being can tolerate. That has amounted loss of more than 35% of the biodiversity in terms of plants and animals' life. That has reflected in the Red Book of IUCN. The ocean currents has changed their path. The cold currents has become hot currents. The air pressure belts have changed. The hot airs are not blowing from the direction it used to blow. Monsoon pattern has changed. Agricultural productivity has drastically gone down. Natural calamities has increased abnormally. So we are going through a climate emergency where we need very aggressive climate action. Aggressive climate action needs to be done by all the stakeholders. But unless every citizen of the planet doesn't become serious and think that it is they collectively as well as individually, they will be very serious to guard their own lifestyle pattern, and the emissions that is being thrown away to the sky could be minimized, and to choose the alternative route of sustainable living without unnecessary leading a wasteful consumption. These small lifestyle habits which are taught by our grandmother, how to behave decently and take care of the planet, to worship sun, to worship trees. That value system the entire planet needs to learn from Indians, and Indians also need to rethink and define their lifestyle if they are unknowingly adopting Western culture.
Mr. Sanwal, do you think some of our practices from the old time, some of our cultural practices, some of our traditions can also be incorporated and emulated by the world population?
See, there will be in two parts. One is that where technology comes in, we have to go for technology that is suitable, like the LED bulbs. But where the individual is concerned, for example, in our daily lives, the amount of temperature we keep, the AC or water heating, now that is where I think it is important that we look back at our ancient civilization. Remember that town planning in India has a history of thousands of years. So it is possible to cool a place by just air circulation in summer. This is what happens in the villages. People sit outside or they have cross ventilation. Now in modern design, because these designs emerged in temperate climates where the key issue was winter, where the key issue was darkness, rainfall. It was not the use of the wind or the nature to sustain life. They were more technology oriented. Now, once this new thinking comes in, it is likely to extend to urban planning. It can extend to the way we spend our time together in the parks and other places. To look back at the ways we were living. Look at the Hawa Mahal in Jaipur, for example. The design was such that the natural breeze will cool it. So there were methods that had been adopted in our history culture, where we use nature to benefit us. We did not want to conquer nature, live with nature. And I think some of those ideas will come back. Reducing waste. Food waste is a very important element. It has traditionally been part of Indian culture that you ate in the kitchen and you did not waste food. You took in your thali as much as you would eat, but you did not waste.
Prime Minister Modi has been leading the front. He launched the global campaign of One Sun, One World, One Greed. And Prime Minister said that he wants to increase the partnership with the world even more while strengthening its resolve towards such goals. We also saw that India is giving a lot of trust on the alternative energy sources. And today India is ranked 4th in the wind energy and 5th in solar energy. And India's renewable energy capacity has increased by around 300% in the last few years. And most important part and most sense of achievement is that the target of achieving 40% of the electric capacity from non-fossil fuel sources has been achieved 9 years ahead of the deadline. And we had also planned to put 10% ethanol blending in petrol. So and that has also been done much before the deadline. So all these activities which we see clearly shows India is serious about tackling the climate change. India has also launched the National Hydrogen Mission, and that has really moved an environment-friendly energy source. And when India committed net zero at Climate Change Summit COP26 in Scotland, Dr. Panigrahi, you think in this era when everybody is talking about climate change, there's an energy crisis, there's a cost of living crisis, all this, the importance of these initiatives launched by India will get resonance in the Western world?
Yes, I was with Honorable Prime Minister in Glasgow at the time of launching Panchamrut, which we have drafted in the interest of the nation. India's vision as a world climate leader, world leader in environment and sustainability, India's basic principle is we are, although not part of the problem, but we would like to lead and want to be the leader in finding solution for the planet's recovery, for planet's health and planet's survival. And this has become our mantra. We are doing a great in renewable energy portfolio. In wind energy, in solar energy, we have proved our credentials and very aggressively, geometrically, the growth is taking place in installation of solar plants, which are historic and beyond question. In addition, the green hydrogen mission is also taking gigantic leaps. I being a part of the missions, we all are very active and pushing the mission of the Honorable Prime Minister. And in Panchamrut, India has very aggressively committed to the world that by 2030, 50% of our total energy basket will come from non-fossil route. Non-fossil route is hydrogen, non-green hydrogen, solar, wind, all kinds of renewable, small hydro energy, in fact, biomass, biogas, as well as the nuclear energy that also is climate friendly. So all these energy basket that India assures to the world, we will achieve 50%, which is not an ordinary commitment. It's a very aggressive commitment. In addition, Prime Minister also declared 3 billion ton of carbon sequestration by increasing forest cover and land use change in agriculture and forestry. India is going to have massive plantation by creating sinks and where carbon dioxide and all other 6 greenhouse gases will be observed by the trees in their body, and India will be one of the highest carbon sequestering country in the world that we have committed for 2030. So this kind of aggressive commitment India has made, although per capita emission is abnormally low, and India has told loudly, India is not the part of the problem, but India is the leader in showing the direction and delivering solution to the planet.
Ms. Tanwal, what will be the impact of this campaign in vulnerable countries which are climate change affected? You know, there are many low-lying countries and island nations which are at the brunt of sinking. So this initiative, do you think this will be caught up by many Western countries who contributes maximum carbon emissions?
Yes. The Western countries have already responded, Estonia, France, Britain, but they are being targeted by the Prime Minister in the sense of their lifestyle, cutting down waste, recycle, reuse. He's not saying don't use. He's saying reduce waste, recycle and reuse. Another important point is that the Prime Minister is also targeting areas like Africa when he is saying that why don't we stress millets, the global year for millets in the world. United Nations has agreed to it because millets is essentially a dry land agriculture. Now, the green revolution came with wheat and rice, but they were water intensive, they were fertilizer intensive, they served a certain purpose at that time. Now a new revolution is needed for dryland agriculture, which is what most of the countries in Africa are involved with. Most of the areas in other countries too. Millets have always been an important part of our lives because they are drought resistant, they are more hardy, they are more nutritious. And he is giving the example of the International Yoga Day, which has been adopted worldwide and stressed by the United Nations, saying that, look, this involves the individual, it involves prevention, and it has to become part of our lives. And he has underlined this by saying that when the India and United Nations work together, they can achieve a lot. The essential message he's giving is that all of this together will go for a better world. With that kind of aim, it becomes inclusive. It becomes that everybody can participate at all levels, in all regions, in all countries, to think about these issues and at least come together with a talking point. Today, big countries are not talking to each other, so they need a talking point. They need an issue, which is a common concern for everybody. But that common concern has to be translated into the lifestyle, into the living conditions, into the situation in each of the countries. And this is what he has done. I think this is going to be a very important step, both for dealing with climate change and for India's position in the world.
Dr. Panigrahi, you spoke about serious intent India is playing in tackling the climate change. A very interesting part is that India is one of the fastest growing economy, and now we have become the fifth largest economy in the world. So to achieve a sustained growth, you go for industrialization, you go for urbanization. And then at the same time, India has become a prime example of how progress and nature can go hand in hand, because we have not just been growing economy, but our forest area has also increased. A number of wildlife is also increasing. So how is all that happening?
You are very correct. Industry or the economic growth is extremely important for survival, for jobs, for employment, and this is one of the key requisites of human survival. When we discuss sustainable development or sustainability, there are three pillars: planet, people, and profit. Profit means business, economics. So profit, business or economics cannot be ignored. That needs to be balanced along with social and environmental objectives. And India know how to do that. And our industries are going through Government of India's rules and regulation and legal framework, how to achieve the higher growth rate with respect to and regard to the people, their basic requirement, as well as environmental conservation. Take for example, there are many industries who are consuming mineral resources. To do that, they clear the forest which is above the earth so that they can mine the resources. But the guideline says they need to plant 10 times of the trees, assuring the 10 times more dense forest and biodiversity for doing so. And like this, there are a lot of legislation, there are a lot of cultural faith and beliefs. Everybody knows about Vaishnava communities and how they protect trees and animals, wildlife especially. Honorable Prime Minister brought 8 cheetah from Africa and planted them in Indian forest in Madhya Pradesh. So we are very mindful for enhance of our biodiversity. And because biodiversity conservation, combating desertification and emission reduction and achieving climate goals all go together.
Dr. Panigrahi,
yes,
you are absolutely right. All of us, individuals and communities, can and must be a part of the solution of protecting our planet and our collective futures. After all, overconsumption is at the root of triple planet emergency of climate change, biodiversity, and loss and pollution. We are using the equivalent of 1.6 planet Earth to support our lifestyle. So this great access is compounded by great inequality. So schemes like Mission Life is going to certainly make a huge difference around the world. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You were listening to a special program on Mission Life, India's Affirmative Climate Action Plan. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.